this is not fair. One man worth $400 billion. I mean, not even 1 billion, 400 billion.
Very rich people have often done so, which is they buy media platforms or publications.
They try to create an enemy in order to control the population.
Very angry, power-grasping guys without a positive agenda for the future, and they are going to use their media and tech assets to further that.
Welcome back, guys. We have a really exciting episode for you today. We are joined by not only an accomplished journalist, but a hugely successful best-selling author, Jacob Silverman. Jacob is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud, and most recently published book, only last month, Gilded Rage, Elon Musk, and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley. By the way, I'm Sunil Kavuri. I've been invested in the cryptocurrency market for over 10 years now. I lost 1.8 million pounds to the FTX fraud. You may have seen me on FTX documentaries such as the BBC Panorama, the Tucker Carlson documentary, the CNBC documentary, the Financial Times. Jacob has been writing about the technology's impact on society for over a decade and been a long-term critic of the surveillance state. In today's episode, we discuss the oligarch takeover of politics, technology, and some of the main characters in his book, Gilded Rage, including Bill Ackman, Peter Thiel, and much more. Before that, I would like to thank our sponsors today, Paradex, a decentralized exchange, but we will hear more about them later in this episode. Make sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. Hi, Jacob. Thank you so much for joining me. So the celebrity author of the newly out published Gilded Rage, Elon Musk, and the Radicalization of Silicon Valley. And very kindly, your publisher sent me this book. However, I did buy an audio as well for support.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jacob.
Glad to. Thank you.
I mean, I started following you and we connected from the FTX, after FTX situation. I would love to hear a bit of your background about yourself. When did you get involved in writing?
Sure. Well, I'm 41 years old and I live in New York and originally from California. I've been writing in one form or another for a while, but I've really been doing journalism and mostly freelance journalism for about, 15 years or so. And in the last decade plus, my focus has really been the tech industry, but usually where tech meets something else. Like in recent years, it's been the politics of the tech industry, but also issues about labor, economics, or, not just like the latest gadget or piece of hype. So around the time I think that we met, I was writing about FTX and the trial of Sam-bankman-fried, which I attended a lot of. And, I was trying to write about crypto fraud and kind of corporate fraud more broadly. I was trying to ask questions about, does this stuff do what it promises to do in the case of crypto? So I often come from a skeptic's perspective on the big thing in tech, but I think that's part of my disposition, but also part of what I end up doing in my reporting, which is, trying to figure out how some things work in practice. More recently, what I've been really focused on is where tech moguls have been putting their money and some of their political and cultural attitudes and how that influenced the 2024 election. And that's what the book is about. But it's also about how did we get here? What was the road of events, political, social, economic, because I talk a lot about the low interest rate era. What are all the things that kind of informed us getting here, where a lot of the major figures in tech now are open MAGA or Trump supporters, and also seem to be very kind of reactionary and angry, especially in the case of someone like Musk. And why are these really rich people so angry and have so many grievances? So it's kind of a broad potential survey of the situation, and in some ways the book goes a lot of different places, but that's where I'm at right now, and that's who I am.
No, it's a fascinating book. You cover, I guess, the supervillains of our time.
That's right.
Ackman and Peter Thiel and all the main characters. So really, really interesting. What would be good as a precursor for your book to provide a bit of back, because you have extensive knowledge, insight about each of these characters. And I think it would be useful for people who may not be as familiar with some of the characters in the book to talk a bit about their background. So, for example, someone like Peter Thiel, what is his background? How did he rise up into the person who he is today, and as a result into the one of your main characters in your book?
Sure. So, Elon Musk is obviously the richest man in the world, depending on the stock market that day, and is in the subtitle and on the cover. But I call the book a bit of a group biography with, you could name, if you're familiar with this world, probably a couple dozen venture capitalists and billionaires and tech executives and founders who are very important. And that's what I try to do, is to sort of survey them as a group in some ways. But one of the people I get into is Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, and various venture capital firms and hedge funds, including Founders Fund. And more recently, some of the public knows him as the co-founder of Palantir, and someone who's a major contractor for the security state through Palantir, and is just a generally powerful and influential figure. He's kind of the presiding spirit of the PayPal mafia, I would say, of that group of people who came out of PayPal, a number of them conservative, who started a lot of big and influential companies, but also got very involved in politics. And I talk about how, as other journalists have noted and charted, the PayPal mafia is a business network, but it's also a political network of people who share interests. And while some of these folks I'm writing about are more recent entrants to politics, or certainly someone like Musk was kind of a middle of the road, somewhat apolitical guy. He didn't openly support a candidate in 2016. Thiel, on the other hand, has always been a political animal. And that's how he's described himself ever since he was an undergraduate in college. He's been writing political op-eds, and he wrote a book with David Sachs in their early 20s. Like, he's just someone for whom politics has always been very important and part of his identity and part of his work in the world, giving lectures, networking, giving money. So that's why Peter Thiel is sort of this figure lurking in the background, because in some cases he actually is lurking a little bit. He wasn't really openly involved in the 2024 election. He said he wasn't going to be. He was very involved in 2020 and 2016, so I get into that some. But he has had a lot of influence, I would say, over people who were conservative in the Valley or became conservative kind of political movers and shakers. He blazed that trail for them.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And would you say, even though he wasn't the central figure in the most recent election, he had his fingers behind other people at the forefront?
Absolutely. I would say, and sometimes it can also be a little convenient for someone like him to say, oh, I'm not really I'm not involved this time around. And then, he supposedly made a late donation, I think, in the cycle. And there's always, there are legal dark money ways to donate to various super PACs and things like that. So it's not clear how much money he had involved, if at all, in the election. But, people like Sachs and Musk are probably in regular contact with Thiel and Joe Lonsdale and a number of other people surrounding Trump during this election. So I would assume that he was well informed and certainly make his influence known. And some Trump appointees, I believe the current CDC acting administrator is a Thiel guy. So there are people Jim O'Neill, there are people from his world that are in the Trump administration. And then when Trump was elected, Thiel held an election night party in Los Angeles that was reported on. That was just a Trump celebration party. So, it's certainly not like, oh, this guy was out or in political exile and not involved at all.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Something I didn't know, and you highlighted, and you had great knowledge that Peter Thiel was involved quite extensively, one of the biggest Trump supporters in his first campaign.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was a time when, for a lot of Silicon Valley, it wasn't really considered socially safe. These are people who, of course, have a lot of power and money. And I think they felt at the time that there was some social disregard or risk to being an open Trump supporter, even though, the Valley has had its share of Republican donors. And or Doug Leone, who's a big venture capitalist at Sequoia, was a Trump supporter in 2016. But Thiel is a proud contrarian and likes to sort of go right when people go left, and is a bit proud of that, of being sometimes a contrarian for his own sake. So he was open about his Trump support. He spoke at the 2016 Republican National Convention, and after the Access Hollywood tape came out, when Trump bragged about grabbing women, Thiel made another donation and seemed to want it publicly known to a Trump PAC. So that
Wow.
he was open and proud about his role that go around. And then he gave an interview after the first Trump term, I believe, where he said it was a little crazier, more chaotic than I expected, which is perhaps putting it lightly in retrospect. But you can kind of see someone who has these traditional attitudes where he wants to be seen as in the vanguard, in the front of something, and then and very much was in 2016. And then perhaps when it didn't exactly go the way he wanted, or he was more content to kind of step into the shadows again.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Really interesting. And I believe you made the connection between these central figures, and you phrased it that they're seeking power for power's sake and control, like all these central figures, Peter Thiel or Ackman or Elon Musk. It's really, really interesting. Is that how you view some of these individuals?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of things. But not to focus too much on Thiel, but he has said, this was a couple of years ago now, I think, in a speech, maybe three or more years ago, that he even acknowledged that his side didn't really have a positive agenda. And, I think that's troubling, or even a little dangerous, when these very rich, powerful people are grasping after power, as rich people in that kind of position tend to do, but they don't necessarily have a positive vision for how they want to bring the rest of us along, or convince other people. And I think that's something that still hasn't fully materialized on the MAGA or even right-wing tech side of things. Like, they talk about, in tech, they talk about AGI and AI and sort of generally making the future better, making it awesome, as Musk says. What is that going to look like? And, you can't really just sell people utopia about that might never happen, about AGI and Mars. A lot of people have very practical concerns in the here and now about, the cost of living or healthcare, or any other number of things that tech itself is in a capacity to help with, or these people in their positions of power. So that's what I think is a little disturbing. And I talk also about, the title of the book obviously is a play on the Gilded Age of 120 plus years ago. And there were a lot of sort of bloody robber barons of the time. And, I live in New York, and some of them have streets or institutions named after them around here. Like, there's a Vanderbilt Avenue near here. But they also built universities and libraries, and whether they felt the social pressure to do so or not, like, there was something enduring and public facing about their incredible wealth. And their descendants are still very wealthy to this day. And we don't really see that from the tech guys. There's this promise that, look, we're going to do AGI. It might kill us all, or it might fix everything. And then those benefits will trickle down to the rest of you. It's almost like a new tech trickle down economics. And, that can be exciting for a lot of people, but I also don't, eventually you have to put up or shut up, or have something to show for it. And whatever kind of innovation we're talking about here. And I think if these guys want to preserve power, much less kind of make the world a better place, as they once talked about, they have to think about how their wealth and power can be used in a more positive direction. And I don't think we're seeing that right now. And I think that also is reflected in how angry a lot of these people are, and their anti-immigrant attitudes that go beyond just limiting immigration to often racism, or like Joe Lonsdale recently retweeted someone saying there should be, I think, it was either limited or zero Muslim migration to the United States. Like, we are going well beyond just like traditional conservative attitudes, but they don't have a positive vision of what they're going to do instead. And that's where I think they need to get, and we all need to get.
I would like to thank Paradex, the decentralized crypto exchange, who is sponsoring this episode. Decentralized exchanges avoid you giving control of your crypto to a centralized exchange. You remain in control of your private keys, not the exchange. This means your crypto always remains in your control, so avoids the risk of FTX type fraud. Paradex's vision is to be the everything app for crypto. Spot, perps, options with deep liquidity, self-custody, and capital efficiency. Trade 250 markets on a super exchange with better than centralized exchange liquidity, institutional grade privacy, all on a fast blockchain. Paradex has a number of exciting features for traders to use, such as vaults. Vaults are where you can deposit your capital to generate passive income. Paradex has their own vault with $50 million locked up, and user community-led vaults would generate a return based on their investment strategy. But remember guys, crypto futures options are risky. Always do your own research before investing and only invest what you can afford to lose. This is not intended to be financial advice, and always consult a professional about your local country rules and with your regulators.
Yeah, no, so some of these people who are coming at the forefront in Twitter, that they're really pushing this narrative of anti-Muslim, anti-immigration, just creating a enemy which other people some perhaps less knowledgeable or just generally an enemy which people can attack and say.
Yes.
So it's quite frightening actually. And what my thought would be, going back to someone like George Orwell 1984, whereby they try to create an enemy in order to control the population, so create fear. It seems that it's being played out in real time now. So whether it's in the Cold War, Russia being the big boogie guy, then it became the Muslim, Islamic, whatever in the Middle East. Now it's China and the Muslims again. It's kind of used quite significantly. But I would love to hear your thoughts about that, and how do you see these guys using their influence in order to manipulate the general population?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. We've seen it a lot on social media, especially since Musk took over Twitter/X. And, they go along with, or seem to believe, a lot of the viral media, that a lot of which is obviously misrepresented or just fake, that kind of America's urban centers, especially blue or Democratic run cities, are violent war zones and are constant places of fear and crime and social decay. I mean, undoubtedly, we've got some problems in this country. And yeah, there's open drug use or social destitution in some big cities. But we also live in a rather safe, prosperous country. And one that also made these guys unbelievably wealthy and successful. And there's a way in which they've turned against those ideas, and they've given up on cities. And to me, that's one reason why they've aligned with Trump, is because they have such a negative view of liberals and Democrats and American cities, starting, of course, with San Francisco, which I get into a lot in the book. But, they act like everywhere is like this. And right now, Trump is using very similar reasoning and very similar storytelling to invade American cities with federal troops and soldiers. Portland, which is a city very much like San Francisco in some ways, but without as much tech industry focus, but similar politics, some similar social issues, but also a decent place to be and live, and totally misrepresented in order to have this federal power grab. And I think that's very much in line with the attitude that, unfortunately, a lot of tech leaders have taken. And again, it's this very fatalist vision where they've kind of given up on people, even as they're more techno-utopian than ever, or at least believe in the promise of AI and AGI, they claim to. But they think that cities and the people who run them are all hopeless now. And I think that's very sad. And I don't really talk like this usually, but in a way, it's kind of not patriotic or anti-American. Like, I have far less money than any of these guys, but I like living largely in this country. I want it to be a lot better. I like living in New York, which certainly statistically, if you look at it, is a pretty safe, big city.
Yes, absolutely.
And and where I live in a kind of middle income, more working class area, you see social problems, but it is not the hellscape that is being described, and that will probably be described by Trump. I expect that maybe after Mamdani is elected in November,
Yeah.
we might see ICE come more to New York.
But it's really bizarre because it's the thing is these figures are pushing towards this right wing, and the oligarchs want to accumulate more wealth for themselves, and obviously it will make the general population more poorer and more destitute, and it will just make the problems even worse. It seems like opposite of, but then they're able to manipulate using social media. How do you feel actually they have utilized their power in order to take control of media sources? What's your view regarding this? And
well, there are a couple of ways. One is just simply the way that very rich people have often done so, which is they buy media platforms or publications. And we're seeing this right now with the Ellison family, Larry Ellison and his son David, taking over Paramount, very publicly changing how CBS and CBS News are going to run, and then looking with their eyes on CNN and other parts of media. And of course, the TikTok takeover, which is a big part of this too. So, and we know that broadly speaking, that algorithms are highly tuned and kind of often maximized for engagement, which can mean provocation, encouraging people towards extreme opinions. And I think all of those elements are in play. And Musk was not just someone who had a lot of money and wanted to take over Twitter. He was someone who was kind of personally obsessed with it. He was probably its most visible user after Trump was banned. He is sort of Twitter's chief power user and generator of memes and narratives, but also, of course, the guy who owns it and determines how it's run, how that helps determine how the algorithm works, and as we've learned, helps determine how much his own posts are seen because he wants to see them more. So I would say like these guys are kind of involved at all levels in that way. And even if you just look at something like Musk's war, as he called it, his war room when he took over Twitter, it was a lot of his friends and colleagues and investors who we've come to know through the media and through their own conversations on Twitter/X and at conferences and stuff. One thing I note a little bit in the book is that a lot of these relationships, while it's important what they do behind closed doors, there's a lot we'd like to know about how they operate. Like 30 plus guys I'm talking about in this book, a lot of them are friends and are talking in the open, giving interviews, telling each other, you're right about this, or San Francisco's a hellscape on X. And so you can observe and piece together some of the things that they say, their relationships. And I think in a lot of ways, I think there's manipulation going on here because some ways they misrepresent reality, but I think they're also very sincere in some ways, like what they want or their view, the very dim view they have of the world and the things that they're angry about whenever they're complaining about progressive politics or wokeness. Like they're not really lying about those kinds of things. So that's something I think we can also take away from here. There's not really like a hidden agenda necessarily. I think that they are in a lot of ways what they appear to be, very angry, power-grasping guys without a positive agenda for the future, and they are going to use their media and tech assets to further that.
Right. That's really, really interesting. I think that you mention it in the book. It's something which they don't want people to realize. They are not like us, like that they're they were multi-billions, and also a lot of them have inherited their wealth. I know you mentioned this, and but like from Ackman to Trump to Elon Musk, they all came from extremely powerful families. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a sense from a lot of these guys that they want to be seen as bootstrapping capitalists, and a lot of them came with a leg up. In some cases with $1 million or two from dad to help start their funds, or simply the benefits of, in the case of Musk, growing up in an apartheid country where he was part of the racial and social elite. Yes, he did leave at 17, but that was, an extraordinarily privileged upbringing and I think it formed a lot of who he is. And then was when he didn't want to be there anymore, was able to leave and go to Canada, then the U.S., and have a pretty swift path to success in Silicon Valley. So, and more importantly, I think also with someone like Musk is that he had a lot of help from the government. I mean, this is
Right.
an industry that right now, actually, as I talk about, is really embracing government work, whether it's in defense or national security, but also throughout its history has really benefited from government subsidies and investments. Years ago, there was an interesting chart or sort of diagram going around about how different components in the iPhone had roots in various government investments in microchips or LED technology or whatever else it might be. And this is perhaps something that should be celebrated. That government and industry were able to create a lot together, or government was able to spawn this very lucrative and world-changing industry. But all these guys do want to be seen as kind of independent.
Right.
And one thing actually I think is worth mentioning that, I have my own politics, but I try to write this book with sort of a broader appeal. And one thing I think that these guys are missing is that, they can be dyed-in-the-wool capitalists, but you kind of have to make the world or society
Yeah.
safe for capitalism.
Yeah.
It's like some of these guys like to talk about Star Trek. There's famously the Bell
Yeah.
riots in Deep Space Nine, where basically you have all these poor people living in shanty towns, and there's
Yeah.
a social upheaval because the world they're living in has become intolerable. And we're maybe not quite there yet, but like we have shanty towns. We have a lot of people who can't afford the basic rudiments of life, who are working hard and trying. I don't think we're gonna have some socialist or communist society, but I do think we have to make one that provides kind of a basic safety net that makes things safer for everybody, and that will still have very rich people and very successful people. And ultimately, that's what's going to get people off the streets of San Francisco.
Yes. Absolutely.
And kind of help those people recover, and that city heals some of its social decay, is getting services to those people, getting them in houses, and not just kicking them out or sending them to prison. And
Yeah.
I just think
Yeah.
that kind of bargain that people have had for a long time, I think that sense of a bargain, or that sense of a bargain that even a lot of very rich capitalists have had for a long
Yeah.
time, is that you need to kind of do certain things to preserve the social fabric, to make sure that, again, society can help sustain everybody, has been lost.
Yeah, and absolutely. And it seems to be the excessive of wealth for these top 10, 100, or the 1,000 richest people in the world or America. It's the most excessive difference between the richest and the poorest in the world ever. And that it will reach to some point when, it's not sustainable. People will realize that, this is not fair. One man worth $400 billion. I mean, not even 1 billion, 400 billion. That's like, or like Larry Ellison now worth, I don't know, what is he? No, numbers like don't mean anything, 300 billion or something. This is like, both of them nearly $1 trillion, two
Mhm.
men. And most people, barely can feed their family. I mean, I think to some extent, for me, it's strange that anyone would even look at them saying they represent the normal people. It's just
Yeah.
bizarre. I find it really
I mean,
bizarre.
that's the funny thing about this sort of false populism, as a lot of people call it, or MAGA populism that we've seen in the last decade. Most politicians are ignoring the needs of everyday people, and that I talk a fair amount about Democrats in the book too. People wouldn't turn to someone like Musk or Trump, billionaires who supposedly have the common man in mind, if they weren't looking for answers.
Yes.
And if the powers that be of both parties and in general had failed them and had ignored a lot of the broad needs of the public. And that's one reason why this stuff works, and why people are like, well, maybe they are telling the truth, or maybe the really rich guy can't be bought, even though, of course, his whole life and career have been about money. But that's what I think we really need to understand, and some people, of course, do, in order to counter some of this kind of stuff and to forge a new politics and some new ways of living with one another, is that like the traditional powers that be have failed us, and we don't owe it to our loyalty to anyone if they're not really helping people.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Something which was interesting, and I think it's related to your book, but also related to some of your interesting tweets and about, supervillain Bill Ackman. Great to hear a bit more about his background, his relationship with Epstein, and generally how he has infiltrated himself in Twitter in order to control certain narratives.
Well, Bill Ackman is a financier who has been around for a while, but I think in some ways becoming popular or infamous in some ways on X because he writes these incredibly long posts has made him a little bit more of the conversation with sort of the Musk network. And he has a lot of the same concerns as these guys, especially after October 7th. I mean, he's a very pro-Israel guy. I mean, he even talked about how he had a meeting with Charlie Kirk a couple weeks before he died about Israel issues. And his wife, Neri Oxman, used to work at the MIT Media Lab, which of course was very heavily infiltrated, you could say, by Jeffrey Epstein, who donated money and kind of co-opted some of the staff, or Joy Ito, who ran the Media Lab, was a close Epstein associate. Just a lot of really ugly stuff in terms of institutional corruption and them embracing someone like Epstein, mostly for his money. And there's a notorious email that leaked from Ackman, I believe, to Joy Ito, saying like, basically he doesn't want his wife Neri Oxman to come up in the MIT report or too much in public discussion. Otherwise, they might have to air some dirty laundry or say more of what happened with Epstein. Now, it's not really clear what that means, if that's just kind of what we know now from these leaked emails or if there's more to it. But she did make this award, this Courage Award, I believe it was called. It was kind of like some kind of sculpture. She's a sculptor, and she made that for Epstein and for a couple other donors. I believe another recipient might have been Reid Hoffman, who is also an Epstein associate. So it's this background that's elite wealth and power and potential corruption in the case of Epstein and MIT and everything else. And he is someone who talks a big game about free speech, like some of these other billionaires. But when it comes down to it, seeks to punish people for them exercising their speech. And, we don't have to go into one's broad definitions of free speech, but yes, there aren't freedom from consequences, but it's certainly notable, I think, when billionaires and very well-connected ones like Bill Ackman, who cares a lot about the Ivy League and Harvard, try to punish students and other people and get them fired or blacklisted from jobs, which he's trying to do because they criticize Israel or they say things he doesn't like. And that's certainly something he engaged in a lot after the October 7th attacks. And in response to the Gaza Solidarity protests on student campuses, he's been very involved in the battles against over anti-Semitism at Harvard and the leadership there. He helped kind of the media campaign to get their president fired, who granted had committed plagiarism, but it was pretty ugly. And then I think some people discovered that his wife's academic record wasn't so clean either.
What was it? She lifted things from Wikipedia? Or?
I believe so. I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy here, of course. And there's hypocrisy in the simple fact that you say, oh, Elon must save free speech when, inevitably he has tried to suppress speech, or he has, as I write in the book, he has made compromises with authoritarian countries because he doesn't want X blocked in other countries. Yeah. So sometimes he suppresses accounts or content or does favors for other governments, but even here in the United States, he has kicked off Washington Post journalists who did totally valid reporting on his corporate activities. These are people who, if we're really calling balls and strikes, as they say, have done, a lot to suppress speech in their own ways. And that's what I think is infuriating to a lot of people, or really frustrating, because they will deny that. And it's of a piece with kind of the false populism thing. They had these things that they care about a lot. And in the past couple of years, it is especially Israel. And, you are allowed to care about that a lot. No one is oppressing Bill Ackman's right to speech or right to talk about Israel. But when you then take kind of vengeful action against people who are often much less powerful or younger, or just emerging from college, and try to seek that to get them blacklisted from
Oh my God.
getting work. I think that is a big deal, and that is a kind of everyday expression of the power these guys wield that people can understand, because also some people have run up against it.
Yes, absolutely. It's horrible. Especially all they were doing is standing up for oppressed people who are unfortunately the Palestinians have nothing, and it's very sad to see. It's just sad.
And I certainly agree with those students, but I also just think, like, is this what you're going to be doing whenever something crosses your personal line? Like,
Yeah, no, absolutely.